see, I was in business with my husband, and I knew I shouldn't have married him. It was a long story, but we were in business together. I finally got the courage up to say, okay, I got to walk away from this. This is horrible, right? The Sunday school Joe, but and like I said, I was calling him the son of I was so mad. I was like, you could do a miracle. You really could. And he didn't. And so I was walking the beach, and what dawned on me is, there could be a wallet washed up, or maybe a money clip, or maybe he dropped. So maybe somebody lost an engagement ring. So I start looking for money. We had it all. So I finally got my courage up to say, I'm out. And there is a long story of the insecurity and self-esteem with all that. And as we were going through the divorce, it came bubbling up to the head that he hadn't filed 3 years of our personal taxes from like 9 years prior. And the stat is on, he's 16, but the stat now is, Mike, that 34% of all 13-year-olds thinks it's normal to post a nude photo or share a nude photo. So yeah, we never would have thought of that, No. Yeah. So he did. And the beautiful thing about when Brian Montgomery's telling the story, he said, he's a 16-year-old boy. Yeah. He wasn't mad. He didn't say he should have known better. He just.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NuCalm now, and he's sleeping more. Go to NuCalm.com, Mike15 promo code. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
LisaBeth Thomas. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about these amazing things you're doing in terms of being a producer, a speaker, and the nonprofit that you're into with local business women in Texas. I just think that is so unbelievably cool. Yeah. Not on our watch, Texas is a big, big deal. Yeah. And I'm so incredibly glad that you're here to talk about it.
Oh, thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here, first of all. And I am thrilled that we are doing that on our watch. And I know we're going to get to that. So, so really from where I was born, we're starting all the way.
Not that far.
Okay. Well, I was born in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. I'll start there. I was born in Grosse Pointe, and then we moved to Florida. So as you were talking about Tampa, Florida, we moved down to Florida, and my parents divorced. So mom and family, kids went back up to Michigan. So I have been in Texas since 1991.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah. So 34
You're a naturalized Texan is what you're saying.
Right. And I gave birth to 2 Texans. So that puts me up a little bit.
There you go. That's right. Up the pecking order, so to speak.
That's right. Because Texans are really protective.
So how long were you in Florida?
So I would go back and forth. So my dad stayed in Boca Raton. So we would go back and forth. I did go to school at FAU, Florida Atlantic University.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome. I mean, I was 17-year-old living north of Fort Lauderdale Strip, and my girlfriend, we'd drive down a little Camaro and bikinis, and it was pretty great at awesome. 17, 18. Yes. And I would not allow that for my children today. But,
just so we're clear.
It was awesome. That's right.
So what was your favorite thing about growing up in both places?
The water, I think. And I'm a Virgo, and I'm an earth sign, but I loved growing up on Lake Michigan. My stepfather had a resort called Chalets on the Lake. And so we were right on Lake Michigan. He worked for Whirlpool. He was way up in Whirlpool, but this was like his side hustle. And so we were always right on the water. And then my dad lived on the Atlantic Ocean in Boca. And so just the beauty of both places,
Yeah.
and growing up in Michigan, I didn't know there was a difference where you could still have water and it not be freezing
Right.
and frozen.
Or freezing over, right? Yeah.
That's right. It was great. So I
That's
loved it.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. So you were a snowbird when you were a kid. That's pretty cool.
Loved it.
So-
And so I tried to go home. My sister and I tried to go home. She's in Fort Lauderdale, actually.
Yeah.
And my brother's in Palm City. But we try to go up to Michigan once a year and visit cousins and my girlfriends from college. And, we go during either the spring, definitely try to go in the fall so we can see the colors. And if I go in the winter, I sneak in some skiing. So I do adore Northern Michigan.
Well,
I really do.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I would say, I would probably say my mom.
Yeah.
And those of you that are listening, he doesn't tell us the questions ahead of time. So if we hesitate, it's because we're thinking. I would say it's my mom. So I don't have a script. I really don't.
There's no script.
There's no script. I have no idea what is going to come out of his mouth.
And just for the record, people have requested that I send them the questions ahead of time. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have done that on request. Okay. So it does happen.
Okay.
And I do ask a lot of similar questions to my guests. It's just we don't ever know where the conversation's going to take us. And so I ask about a lot of different things, right? We're a little like water here. We just kind of, right? So path of least resistance, so to speak, right? So so in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Theater. I loved theater. I loved anything in the drama. That's what I thought I would be, an actress. I was in band and I played the clarinet and bass clarinet but in marching band, I became the drum major because I wanted to be out front. I was like, there you go.
That's where the performers are, by the way.
That's right. And I came across a picture of me in my uniform not long ago, and I was like, oh, geez, but oh well. I thought it was cool at the time, but
I'm sure you were.
Up here I was.
The coolness factor hasn't ever worn off, by the way. So we're clear.
But no, I loved theater. I loved being the MC of the talent shows. I loved all that. And I really thought, I went to Lee Strasberg School of Dramatic Arts. So I really thought that was going to be my direction.
Yeah.
And, but I ended up being on the other side of the camera. I've done modeling. I've done commercials. I've been an actress in local, like in Traverse City and different things like that. But I also loved the producing side. I loved, being on the other side of the camera and directing. So that's how I kind of flipped to the other side.
Gotcha. In high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
Mrs. Johns.
Yeah.
And Mr. Lindell. So I had a couple, and Mr. Fowler, so Faust, as I should say. I don't even know if they're all still alive. Mrs. Johns was the English teacher, and everybody loved Mrs. Johns. And she was going down the attendance very first day as a freshman. And she goes down, and back then everybody just called me Lisa, not LisaBeth. But she goes, Lisa Thomas, you're not John, Jeff, and Laurel's sister, are you? And I said, yes. And she goes, oh God. So I knew right away that my reputation was preceding me.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you had some living up to do.
I did.
That's so cool. I love that story. So after high school, where did you go?
After high school, I went up to Traverse City to Northern Michigan University. Northern Michigan College up in Traverse City. This is going to be part of the story in the long run, had been accepted at the London School of Dramatic Arts.
Wow.
I was accepted at the University of Michigan. I was accepted to different places. And I believe my insecurities or I don't know what kept me from going far away. I don't know. I know at one point in time, my mom asked if I would like to go to boarding school. And I thought, oh, they're trying to get rid of me. I mean, I just didn't understand it. Now I look back and go, oh my goodness, why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
But I didn't. I didn't do that. And, but I love being in Traverse City. It was wonderful. And then I went to Central, and then I went out to New York to the Lee Strasberg School of Dramatic Arts, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal. I had one of Lee Strasberg's last classes before he passed away.
Oh my
Which was
gosh.
yeah. And so we had incredible actors and actresses in the classes. And I was 21 years old. And then I worked at the Essex House. I was a cocktail waitress. And so a great story on that. My cousin, Margot, worked on Wall Street. And so when I was accepted at Strasberg, I flew out, and she lived in a loft, and I was going to sleep on the floor on a cot or whatever and sleep with her. And I went out the day that Princess Diana and Charles got married, because we watched the wedding. I flew in and we were watching the wedding. And so Sunday came, and I was going to go to the school on Monday, and I told my cousin, well, I'm going to go to school tomorrow, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'll get a job and I'll get an apartment, and we'll start school. So I should be out this week. And she just kind of laughed at me like, okay, whatever. You've never been to New York. That's not how it works in New York, right? And so I go to school. I pull off the bulletin board, somebody looking for a roommate, called her. It was in a brown store, 5-story walk up, but got my apartment. And I don't know what made me go to the Essex House. I think I'd always seen it on TV. And so I went down to Central Park, and I went into the Essex House, and I asked for the food and beverage manager, and I went in the back, and I said, I'm just new. I just moved here this weekend, and I'm looking for a job. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's funny, because the cocktail waiter who's been with us for like 30 years just resigned. Can you start, tomorrow night? And so I go back to my cousin and say, okay, I'm starting at the Essex House. I've got an apartment, and moving out, starting school. So yeah, it was pretty.
She didn't
phenomenal.
laugh then, did she?
She did not laugh then. So yes, but I loved it. I mean, living in New York was, again, amazing at that age.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Had to have been quite an experience.
It was. And the interesting thing that I found is that several people, as a cocktail waitress, would say to me, you're not from here. And I would say no. And I figured it was my accent, even though I don't have a whole lot of a Midwestern. I now have a little Chicago, twang. But I said, oh, is it my accent? And they said, no, you look us in the eye when you speak to us. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a thing. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
so,
that's very cool.
Yeah.
It gets people's attention, that's for sure, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So at some point you end up at FAU. How did that take place?
So I ended up at FAU during my Central Michigan time period, I decided to take a semester off and go down and go live with my dad. And so I registered, I took acting classes down there. And here's a really weird point of that. So after 9/11, I was constantly stopped on airplanes. When I would go to check in, I'd have to go through extra screening. And they typically then would put me in first class or give me something as an apology, but I was always screened. There was times that I was getting on the plane and they'd pull me off and scan me again. And I'm like, I don't know what, I don't think I fit a profile, but okay. One time we were in Dallas and we had to get off the plane, and we were standing in the galley. And I look, and there was the seating chart and my name and my seat number, and it said passengers of interest. And I said to the flight attendant, why am I on there? And she said, oh, no, you can get off now. You shouldn't have seen that. And I thought, that's weird. And
no kidding.
It was the oddest thing. And it was every time I flew. But again, I usually got bumped to first class, so I didn't mind it after a while. And then one day, I never knew this. I heard on the TV, on the morning news, that the pilots from 9/11 gone to flight school at FAU. And that's the only thing I could think of that I had been
The
to
terrorists
FAU.
had gone to FAU.
Yes.
Wow.
They had gone
I
to
didn't
flight
know
school.
that.
Yeah. Whether it was for
I
the
knew it was in
full-time-
Florida, but I didn't know it was.
That was it. They were down there. And so that's
Wow.
that's when I went, that had to be
Yeah,
that had to be the connection. I don't know how.
That's incredible.
Well, isn't that incredible? And then all of a sudden it stopped. There was a point in time that it stopped, which I was a little disappointed about that. But go ahead, frisk me. You're good. You know?
So you started missing first class, didn't you?
I know.
You're like, hey.
Hey, come on.
I used to be special. Right?
Yeah.
I was sort of expecting to get patted down a second time. Come on now.
You know, when you're single, you kind of look forward to it too. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
come on.
Bring it, you know?
Yeah.
So, so after New York, where do you go?
After New York, then moved to Connecticut, married my college sweetheart. He was working for Marriott in Stamford, got married, had my daughter, Sarah. She was born in Connecticut. And then we had an opportunity to move back to Northern Michigan. So we went back to Northern Michigan and I started working for an advertising agency up there. And that's how I got on into the advertising world. And that's where I was doing local commercials and things like that. And then I was doing placing advertising and doing commercials. I wasn't the production side at that point in time. And then one of our clients, I hate to say that John Meeske, who owned Shush Mountain Shanty Creek, which is in Northern Michigan, became the director of resorts for CCA Club Resorts out of Dallas. And he started the resort division. So he then pulled me and we went down to Pinehurst. And he ran the resort division of CCA out of Resorts of Pinehurst, which was not a bad gig, I got to tell you.
Kidding.
I was my father's favorite child when I worked there, and because he could play any golf course. He could play number 2, he could play number 7. That was a phenomenal experience.
For the people that don't know what Pinehurst number 2 is, it's where the U.S. Open was played and where Payne Stewart won famously over Phil Mickelson. Phil Mickelson's wife, he came in second. Phil Mickelson's wife, Amy, was pregnant with their child. And he had a pager in his bag. And if that pager went off, he was going to quit playing the US Open and get on a jet. He had a jet waiting for him and he was headed to California to beat her.
Yeah.
And so at the end of it, there was this very famous line where Payne Stewart gave Phil Mickelson a hug, put his hands in his face and said, "You won bigger than I ever have. You're going to be a father." Yeah. And it was one of the coolest things ever. Not long after that, Payne Stewart died in a plane crash.
That was so sad.
But it was an amazing moment, and it happened at Pinehurst number 2. So so for people that don't know the background of Pinehurst, it's a famous place. It's absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous. One of the prettiest places on the planet.
Yeah, if you ever get to go, it is that whole Pinehurst area, not just the resort. Yeah, it just is phenomenally beautiful, and it's like you step back in time.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
So that was one of the greatest opportunities.
So you worked there for how long?
I worked there for a couple of years, and while I was there, and this was back in the 80s, Pinehurst was seeing that we're getting a lot of first-time business, but not a lot of repeat business. And so then it was put on me to figure out what was going on. And I remember going up to one of the front desk clerks and said, "How's your day going?" And she said, "Great, if the guests would leave me alone." And I went, "Oh, I think I know the problem."
No kidding.
Yeah. So
somebody's not cut out to be in hospitality.
Right. Wow. And you're in the most beautiful place. And I mean, and money's flowing out of people. And I mean, and any business, repeat business is your bread and butter. Once you get them, you want them to keep coming back. Yeah. So I was then tasked with coming up with a training program on hospitality, of guest services. And that was back in the day when Tom Peters was doing customer service training. You remember that? That was a big thing back in the 80s. So what I did, so hopefully Disney and Hilton aren't listening, is I went to their programs, and they were all, back then it was the customer's number one. Customer's number one. Yeah. And I plagiarized some of them, pretty much all training is the same. It's just how you deliver and that type of thing. But I did steal some of their information. But I went back to Pat Corso, who was the general manager, president of Pinehurst at the time, and said, "But I think from reading everything is that the guest is number 3.
Yeah.
And I said, I'd like to talk to you about that. And I said, because number one, if the employee feels motivated and inspired and valued, they're going to feel great about their job. Number two is the team. If they're backing each other, if they're working together, covering for each other and making it happen as a team, the guest is going to feel like number one.
Absolutely.
And he was like, that's a great idea. So
Mhm.
I wrote the program and ended up teaching. I think I did over 800 sessions or 800 people in
Wow.
this training program. Again, I was 26 years old, 27 years old, and it is now CCA's top priority training program.
Yeah.
And if I would have known at the time to copyright or trademark, but again, I was working for Pinehurst, I was working for CCA, but to this day, that training program or something like that is what I wrote for Pinehurst. And so from there, and what I discovered at Pinehurst, and I discovered later when I worked for the ABC station here in Austin, is that I'm not cut out for corporate. I'm not a corporate. I don't know how to play that game, right?
Well, I know how to
I
play it. I just don't like playing it.
Yeah, I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
The thing to me, is all of a sudden you'd hear that somebody had said something about you that wasn't even true. You weren't even there, and I was like, oh, I just don't like this.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about the program, and so I called my mom. And I said, I think I'm going to leave Pinehurst and take my show on the road. Turn it into a program and train. And she said, well, what about insurance? What are you going to do? What happens if it doesn't work? And I said, well, if it doesn't work, I'll be a waitress.
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
Right.
I make great money as a cocktail waitress. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so I did. And for years, that's what I did. I traveled and was traveling around teaching, and I would customize this program for whatever client I was working for. And so that really got me the speaking bug, and I loved it. I loved being in front of groups. I loved having fun with them. I went to Toastmasters and they said I sucked. I'd never make it as a speaker, and so my first $5,000 gig, I was like, so they're Toastmasters, back in 1989 or something. I was like, yes, I am. So it turned out to be the best. And then we moved. I married a gentleman that I had met in Atlanta at Whirlpool. I was doing the program for Whirlpool. We met, and he was getting, they're doing a voluntary layoff. And so he asked me to marry him, and he wanted to move back to Texas. And that's how I got to Texas.
Wow.
And so got pregnant pretty quickly with my son, and then a year later with my daughter. But I was traveling so much. I would be on airplanes and I was pregnant and I was speaking. And I remember I was doing a program for IBM back in Charlotte. And I didn't realize I was in a movie theater, but they had me on other screens and other parts of the theater. So, because they had so many people there, which was really cool. But I was standing there doing my program with a bag of Cheerios because I had so much morning sickness. I was like, oh my goodness. And so it was hard to fly and do that. And so I was at a chamber meeting in Austin, and the general manager of KView, the ABC station here in town, we happened to sit at the same table, and we all were introducing ourselves. And she said, I would love to talk to you about becoming our marketing director for the station. And my head was like, no more travel, be home. That would be great. And so that's how I got into the advertising. I had an advertising background, speaking, and then I got back into advertising.
So
that was pretty quick.
What was your favorite thing about speaking? Or what's still, I guess. So you're still doing it.
I still do it.
What's your favorite thing about it?
I love catching people off guard.
Yeah.
I love saying things that people are thinking and that, I love making people laugh. But I think the best thing I love is when you look out and someone goes, oh, yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
When the student's ready, the teacher will appear.
Right.
That one person that looks at you and goes, oh, I get it now. Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is so cool. I don't know how to explain to people what that feeling is like.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So the very first Toastmasters that I ever volunteered for here in San Diego, or went to here in San Diego. They had me give my first impromptu speech that day, and it was on scissors. And
Okay.
22 minutes later, I finished talking about how they divided Europe with scissors, right? After World War II.
Nice.
And afterwards, the guy that runs Toastmasters walked me out to my car and he said, I'm going to say this to you in the most respectful, kind-hearted way I possibly can. I don't want you to come back.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And I said, okay, can I ask why? And he
Okay.
goes, yeah, you're too good.
Wow.
You're intimidating the people that are here to try to learn how to speak. Obviously, you know how to speak. Obviously, you don't have issues, right?
Right.
And I'm just going to ask you to not come back. And I'm like, wow.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of crazy, which is
Can,
interesting because I'm getting ready to join a Toastmasters. So yeah.
that's well, and what I have found, and I know you're going to agree with this, that when I tried it once or twice to not be myself, like, oh, I better
Oh
be
yeah.
more serious, because
Yeah.
I was speaking to all the city managers of Texas,
Yep.
and I was trying to be, I better not be silly, I better not, and I failed.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah. And it feels
And
bad. It doesn't feel right. Like you feel, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like you're having an out of body experience,
right,
but not a
like
good
I'm
one.
here, but then
Right.
I'm over
Yeah.
here too.
Not a
It's
good one. Yeah. Yeah.
and they weren't laughing and they weren't
Yeah.
that, because I wasn't being, and I thought, never again.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be myself, whether I
Yeah.
turn my back on somebody, whatever I'm doing, I'm just going to be myself. And
That's
that's
it.
how I've been the most successful. Yeah.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to speak in front of thousands of people. And it was a last minute thing. 10 minutes before the deal, the speaker got really sick and could not go. And they didn't have a backup. And they looked at me and they said, you've done this so many times, heard it so many times, and been with him on stage and that kind of thing. Will you do this? And I said, yes. And then after I did that, they left me alone. And I'm not joking. I was having the beginnings of a panic attack. And I had an epiphany, which is what happens a lot of times when you get in these really stressful situations.
Mhm.
I realized that if I cared more about the people that I was talking to than I did about how I looked saying it, I was going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right. And so I went out there, I engaged the audience. I ended up with an 85. They did a survey afterwards. 85% of those people believed I was one of their best friends. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. They'd never seen anything like it. And it was just one of those things where I just relaxed and I
Yeah.
made it about them and not about me. And everything took care of itself. It just, and all the
That's-
nerves went away, the
yeah.
whole thing. But I'm
That's
literally up
beautiful.
there going, what am I going to say? There's attorneys, there are business owners, there are commercial real estate brokers, there are all these people that have this super high standard about, right? And I've literally never done this before.
Yeah.
How am I going to impress these people, right? And it was that whole thing that just got me all worked up, right? So, did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called NuCalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with NuCalm.com. Go to NuCalm.com today, promo code Mike15. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. I saw on your website that you worked with D.R. Horton Custom Homes.
I still do. I still
I
do.
used to be their preferred lender in San Diego.
Nice.
I did 70% of their business in San Diego.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
During the 90s. Yeah. So
I love them. I've been working with them since 2011.
Yeah.
And the Central Texas.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because when Kent Zarbuck, who was the president of Central Texas, went to GSD&M, which is the largest advertising agency in the state of Texas. And what happens is that back in the day when I had the ad agency, groups would go to GSD&M because who wouldn't want to go to GSD&M? But they only took clients that were 20 million and above.
Yeah.
And so then they would refer, and we were very fortunate because we were on the referral list. So we got a lot of referrals from them. And so D.R. Horton was scouting for a new agency, and I believe he went to 6 or 7. and came to the office. Hilarious guy. He was so much fun. Everybody got along. We joked. We talked about all the things that we would do. And I thought, okay, we got this. This is going to be good. And so then I did the follow-up call, crickets, called again, nothing, emailed, nothing, got nothing back. Until finally I was like, okay, one last time, because I know there's a point where you go, all right, you're going to be obnoxious. So I thought I'm going to call one more. So I called his assistant. Took me like 6 tries to remember, oh, he has an assistant. And she said, oh, he's on a cruise with his family and he's off the grid. And I went, oh, okay. So during our initial meeting, Kent had said, whoever we go with, they're going to be like on a 60-day probation period, because we want it to be just to see, which made sense. So I emailed him when I knew he was going to be back in the office. And I said, so I remember you saying that whoever you hire would be on a 60-day probation period. I go, why don't we do like a 90-day, super secret. I can't remember what the thing was from Animal House, but I said Animal House, secret probation. Whatever it was, whatever the saying was, I can't believe that just went out of my head. And, we won't tell anybody, we'll do this. And I made it really funny, Animal House sayings. And within 30 seconds, my phone rang and he goes, now that was funny. You're hired. Yeah. double secret probation or whatever it was. And,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah. So we've, like I said, we're on 2025 and I still work with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So at some point you decide to start or work with Not on Our Watch, Texas. Is it okay if we talk about that for a second? Because I think it's one of the most important things you've ever done.
It is. It is. So Not on Our Watch, Texas, to back up from that, I started Texas Women in Business 15 years ago with 4 friends and then 25 friends. And then we got 130, we invited some women to a happy hour and 138 showed up and said, hey, should we start this group? Because how hard can it be to start a nonprofit? Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. Oh yeah.
For all of you that are thinking about starting a nonprofit, look at the look on her face.
Yeah. Call me. Me. Oh my gosh. So
there'll be counseling involved, just so we're clear.
Yeah. This could be vodka. So started that, and we grew to like 500 members the first year. It was awesome. And now we're in San Antonio, Austin, Lubbock, Houston. We've got a couple other cities that want to start. Nobody's paid. It's all volunteer, and it's great. It's all chapter driven. It's wonderful. So for the 10-year anniversary, which would have been in 2020, in 2019, the group asked me if I would be president again for the 10-year anniversary. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool. That's quite an honor. I would love to. And so I said, sure. So I went to the governor's office here in Texas. I went to the Governor's Commission for Women, which is in his office, and said, we're Texas Women in Business. We're going to have a gala. We're going to be drinking. We're going to have dancing. We'll have we'll do all that. But what can we do for Texas, which will make an impact? And this was September of 2019. And Christina McKinney, the executive director, said, well, Texas is #1 in human trafficking and the most reports on human trafficking. And that was my face.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
I said, what do you?
Oh my goodness.
I said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I said, I used to be in the newsroom. I'm in media. I'm a mom.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And she said, yeah, we are. And now we're #2. And I think it goes between California, it goes between Florida, it also a lot of the Midwestern states are coming up in their trafficking. So the governor gave us the capital. So what I said to her is, why do we not know this?
Yeah.
How do we fix something and how can we help if nobody's even aware of it?
No kidding.
And so I said, my background's marketing and advertising. Let's do an awareness campaign. Let's make people aware so they can then do something about it. And then we can start tackling it. Well, the governor gave us the capital to launch June of 2020. COVID. No launch, of course.
Yeah.
And then the next year, still COVID, no launch. And then the next year, people were still afraid of being in groups. No. So we didn't launch until September of 2023.
Hmm.
But what came out of that, as we were coming out of the COVID era, we found that online exploitation and sexual grooming of our kids online went up 567% during COVID. Because the predators go where the kids are, and the kids are right here on this.
Where they were going to school.
Or on this.
Where they were going to school. Yeah. So they're spending all that time on the screen.
Yeah. And so it turned out that we started really looking at the stats and said, yeah, human trafficking is huge. It's I think it's like a $30 billion industry, huge. And there's a lot of groups that are doing phenomenal things. But coming out of COVID, not a lot of people were focused on online grooming and exploitation and sextortion. Yeah. And so then we started thinking 99.9% of all children have one of these, a laptop or a gaming device. So this does fit. This does hit every home. Yeah. Because a lot of times people go, oh, that's a great nonprofit. That has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this does. And I start speaking engagements out with that, saying, I know this has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your child. And then when I go through the stats and I get down to this is the new white van.
Yeah. And
you're putting your kids to bed with the new, the predator in the white van. Every person in the room goes, oh my gosh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So that's how we got started.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So what has been your favorite thing about two things? Number one, starting the group, the Texas Women's Group, right? And then also Women in Business, and then also Not on Our Watch.
The favorite thing about Texas Women in Business is we have always been and still are about collaboration.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, we've had to postpone it 4 times because of weather here in Central Texas. But tomorrow night, we call it Wine, Women, and Vision, where we'll do drinking wine, we'll get together, we'll do vision boarding. Or if we're not doing a vision board, we call it Wine, Women, and whatever. We just get together and network. But we have 6 women's groups coming together.
Yeah.
And we have every president of the group, the different groups, stand up and talk a little bit about their group. Because if someone goes, Texas Women in Business, not making the connections that I want, but I really like that one, or as I'm involved in many groups. So we want them to know that we're about collaborating, supporting each other. It's not a competition.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. And we started that 15 years ago. And I was having lunch the other day with a woman who just joined TWIB. And she was just like, I've never been in a group that they were like, what do you need? How can I help you? How can I support you? And I think that's been so missing, especially in women's groups. It's kind of more of what can you do for me? Or don't talk to her, or don't go to that group. You got to stay here. So I love that. And when I went, and part of my story of success and failure, and then back to success, is my ad agency. I was in business with my husband, and I knew I shouldn't have married him. It was a long story, but we were in business together. I finally got the courage up to say, okay, I got to walk away from this. This is horrible. But we had 14 employees at one point. We had clients. We had a blended family. We had it all. So I finally got my courage up to say, I'm out. And there is a long story of the insecurity and self-esteem with all that. And as we were going through the divorce, it came bubbling up to the head that he hadn't filed 3 years of our personal taxes from like 9 years prior, 10 years prior. And that's interest and penalties daily. Mm-hmm. He pleaded hardship with the IRS. So he was off with $50 a month. And then the IRS was coming after me for the rest because I kept the business. So my identity at the time was my business. So, we were producing movies with Robert, we were behind the scenes with Robert Rodriguez, Sandra Bullock. We were on the white carpets with, Sylvester Stallone. We were throwing parties, and we were, I think if you looked at the rankings, we were the 13th sized and known ad agency in Austin, which was really, really phenomenal.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. I was crumbling because the IRS kept scooping in underneath and taking money to pay for all this. And my friends knew something was going on. They knew I was going through a divorce, but I didn't tell anybody that I was losing it all.
Yeah.
And a couple people that, like my sister and a couple of people said, well, go ahead and go get new business. And I was like, I can't. All it's going to do is go away. You know, the money's going to go away. I can't. And I literally was going home buying the cheapest bottle of wine, and I'm talking bottom shelf, cheap wine, not mid, not high, the bottom $7. And I was pissed off at God. It was horrible. So anyway, during a 3.5-month period, I lost my business because I finally had to stop. The IRS took my home to pay off that, and my mom died.
Oh my gosh.
All in 3.5 months. So I was well, you can imagine. I mean, I had nothing. I was sleeping on couches. I was homeless for 6 months.
Yeah.
And luckily my kids were married or at school, so they didn't have, but they lost their house.
Yeah.
And so I hid it. I lied. I kept the mask on that I'm fine. I'm great. Everything's good. Because I didn't want anybody to know that I was a failure.
Yeah.
In my mind,
Yeah.
I was a failure. And so you're asking the favorite thing about Texas women in business. So a girlfriend of mine asked me to go to her home in Galveston. And I was like, I can't, I don't have any money. I have nothing. And she said, no, we're just going to walk the beach. We'll eat whatever in the refrigerator. Just come. So we go to the beach, and the Saturday night I said to her, I'm going to go walk the beach because I'm really pissed at God. So I have to go have a conversation because I'm like, why can't I be like Job, right? The Sunday school Job. Like I said, I was calling him the son of I was so mad. I was like, you could do a miracle. You really could. And he didn't. And so I was walking the beach, and what dawned on me is there could be a wallet washed up, or maybe a money clip, or maybe he dropped. So maybe somebody lost an engagement ring. So I start looking for money. I start picking up rocks and seaweed, and I walk out in the water, and I'm looking, and I'm saying, come on, God, come on, give me this, give me some money, show me. And finally I got mad, and I said, God, show me the treasure on the beach. And as clear as day, Mike, in a voice I'd never heard before, said, oh, LisaBeth, you are the treasure on the beach. And I turned around because I was like, wait, it wasn't my voice.
Yeah.
There's nobody behind me.
Yeah.
And I went, wow. Still didn't get what he meant.
Yeah.
But then, of course, then it started dawning on me. I had it all. It was just all buried underneath this.
Right.
So we go back to Austin, and the Texas Women in Business had to ask me to speak or to introduce somebody. I don't remember why I was being asked to be on stage. So I was going to get up and do my thing. And I stood up to introduce, and I looked at the 200 faces, and I said, I have something to tell you. And so I verbally vomited everything, and they had me, I know they had me on, a platform or whatever, because I was doing all these movies and I had success and I was running all these things. And here I am admitting I'm homeless.
Yeah.
I've lost it all. I got nothing. And my joke became, I wanted to marry so badly, I married so badly. And most women in the audience go, I got you. So that became kind of my joke. And so 15 minutes, I tell my story of loss and vulnerability, and I just buried it all. And I stood there when I was done, waiting for something, and there was silence, and I went, well, there's my judgment. I'm a loser. And then I got a standing ovation. And as I walked off the stage, women were lined up, Mike, to talk to me.
Yeah.
And they were hugging me and saying, I'm miserable. I have this smile plastered on. I have to file bankruptcy. My divorce, my husband's having an affair. All these women, and if you can share, I can share.
Yeah.
If you can tell your story and you're still walking through that fire, but I know you're going to get, I can do it. And I think that was my favorite moment of being vulnerable and how important it is to tell your story, and that these women got it and it opened the door for them.
Wow.
So that was a long answer. I apologize.
No,
but
it's fine. It's the best answer I've heard in years.
Yeah. So
I hope you weave that into your speeches.
I do. I actually
Because-
wrote a chapter in a book, which it's called Pieces to Purpose. And it was the chapter of women who've overcome. And took me the longest time because my ex is still here, and it's not my kid's father. So I wanted to be, so when I tell my story, I say, yes, and I've been married several times, and I make sure that he knows who I'm talking about, not
Right.
my kid's dad. So
Right.
and that's why I didn't tell it for a long time, because I didn't want my kids to go,
Yeah.
wait, is she talking about dad? So, but I do. And so the chapter's called Treasure on the Beach. And so, yeah, it was pretty phenomenal.
Do you mind if we talk about something for a second?
So it depends on what you want.
In your story, yeah, I said, right.
Okay. Yeah.
In your story, you talked before about Pinehurst
Yes.
and about the conversation that you had with the girl at the front desk about if these people would just leave me alone.
Right.
And one of the things you discovered was the importance of hospitality, importance of customer service, that kind of thing, right? What's interesting is that happens. Then you fast forward all those decades and you go and you're at this Texas Women in Business deal, and they're asking, how can we help? How can we help? What can we do? How can we help? Right? It's like a complete 360. Like,
wow, good
or
point.
180, I mean, right? Where you have this outlook of things, and then you have this. That progression is basically full circle. If you think
I
about
never thought of that. I never thought about that. You're right.
it's your story.
Yeah. Wow.
Encapsulated. It's your victory. I mean, it's like, this is one of the coolest things ever, Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
I clued into it when you were talking about it.
I never thought of that.
It's wild. That's just crazy.
I'm going to steal that for
steal it.
Talk.
Steal it, baby. Yeah. Steal it. So what was your absolute favorite thing about Not on Our Watch?
Almost that. I would say two things, but like we were talking about earlier, the ahas.
Yeah.
I love when what we've been doing is we do panel discussions, and we bring in cybersecurity and Secret Service and detectives, and the guys that literally are behind the scenes playing a 13-year-old girl when they're, to grab these predators and things. And we go to different communities, and a lot of the people in the audience, again, are like, that's not my child.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. And by the time we get through and talking about it, they're like, oh, yeah. I got, oh my God, what can I do?
Yeah.
And knowing that by bringing the awareness, telling them the red flags, telling them what they need to look out for, and giving them the tools that they need to tell their children is going to save a child. How cool is that?
Yeah.
And we're not recreating the training, NCMEC and the National Center of Missing Exploited Children, Project Protect Our Children. There's so many. So we point to where people need to go. We don't need to reinvent, but we want them to know. Because literally during COVID, and when we started coming out of COVID, we started seeing these stats. People are like, you did what?
Yeah.
What do you mean we have an issue?
Yeah.
So how can you protect against what you're not aware of?
Well, it's not something I think a lot about. It's not something that, I raised two kids, right? I have a 26-year-old and 24-year-old. Well, the baby's a girl, right? And, I have always had conversations with her about not talking to strangers and, all those types of things, right? And what to do if somebody, God forbid, attacks her that's trying to harm her, this is what you do, right? To defend yourself, kind of thing. What really got me was finding out how this happens, like how unbelievably vile this is. Like it's evil personified, right? And how these girls will go to, and we're talking young girls, they'll go to a party that they're invited to by a friend, somebody will put something in their drink and they'll wake up the next morning or 2 days later or 3 days later in some other state.
Yep.
And they're literally in prison and there's no way to contact anybody, no way to communicate. They just disappear. I had no idea that that was as prevalent as it was, or that that sort of thing happened, that people did that kind of thing on a regular basis, and they make a ton of money doing it. I had
They
no
could-
idea how much, in terms of financial gain there was potentially in this. And it's one of those things that your organization making people aware has probably saved countless lives, only because it's brought an awareness, right? Those
Right.
parents won't allow that kid to go to a party necessarily, or they'll be more, and I mean, I was always one of those people that was super careful about who my daughter spent time with and sleepovers and all that kind of stuff. I always wanted to know whoever it was whose house she was going to, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like, and what happens, this with teenagers, is they rebel. And unfortunately they rebel, and these predators count on it. They count on being able to manipulate them into rebelling, and they end up in sexual slavery for decades. It's
For
like
decades.
oh, it's just scary. Absolutely,
Well,
completely scary.
we had an opportunity I don't know if if you've ever heard of Grant Cardone out of Miami.
Yeah.
All right, his wife Elena is on our board of advisors.
Yeah.
She was our first keynote speaker, and everybody was like, well, she's in Miami, why? And she was like, I don't care, it's about protecting our kids.
Yeah.
So she and I had an opportunity to go to Tulsa with Kevin Metcalf, and they were doing an undercover kind of sting, and it was beautiful because they brought in 6 or 7 different police departments from Florida and Mississippi and Michigan and Arkansas, and they all were working together. And how do we not be in silos, but how can we work together so that information is together? And while we were there for 2 days, and we had I don't want to say fantastic time, but it was a fantastic time watching to see how they worked. We were reading. They had apprehended a 11-year-old autistic girl at the airport. And we went back and we were reading, and it was in real time, that somewhere along the line she had posted, and this is what they do. There's about 500,000 predators at a time, and they have about 200 screens or 200 people they're watching at a time. So sometimes they can do it quickly, sometimes it takes a while because they befriend these kids, especially the younger. So the beginning of it was, she was just talking about something, and then she said, I wish I could travel. Well, that was the predator's opening.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, I love to travel. And then this conversation started happening. She thought he was a 15-year-old girl or boy, I don't remember. But it got to the point where, if you lived with us, we live in Portland. If you lived with us, our family travels, and my mom would love you. Well, here's this young girl, autistic, and I'll send you a ticket, and we're getting ready to go to somewhere. We'll send you a ticket. Well, luckily, detectives have been following it. So they were able to get her at the airport, getting on the airplane.
Oh, my goodness.
That girl would never have been seen again. She would have been sold into trafficking. And then the horrible, horrible part of this is when these kids are used up, or the adults even are used up, they sell them for their organs.
Yeah.
So it's not just that, it's dead or alive. They make money off these people. And Brian Montgomery out of Mississippi, his son was shot himself, killed himself. Great family. They, Christian family, went to church, hunted together. I mean, just this really wonderful family. And at midnight, and they've got the text string of it, he was going to bed, and somebody wrote, hey, what's up? What's up with you? They started talking. He thought it was a girl. And somewhere along the line, you send me a nude photo, I'll send you one. And the stat is on, he's 16, but the stat now is, Mike, that 34% of all 13-year-olds thinks it's normal to post a nude photo or share a nude photo. So yeah, we never would have thought of that,
No.
yeah. So he did. And the beautiful thing about when Brian Montgomery's telling the story, he said, he's a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He wasn't mad. He didn't say he should have known better. He just said he's a 16-year-old boy. Every man out there who was 16 years old knows that I'm not blaming him. So, as soon as he sent the nude photo, because she said, I'll send one back to you. Now, send me $1,000 or I'm going to send that photo around your school. I don't have $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, you better go steal it from your parents. I can't steal it from my parents. I can't do that. Well, I'm going to post it right now. I'm sending it to your mom. That was from midnight to about 3 or 3:30 in the morning. We've just sent it to your mom. And so he went downstairs to the gun safe, went back up to his room and shot himself because he was so mortified that his mom would see.
Oh, God.
And they can't do that. They can't post it. They don't have access. They don't have that, but he didn't know.
Yeah.
And what Brian Montgomery said, and this is where we grabbed onto that saying, he said, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I never knew I had to tell my son about this.
Yeah.
He said, I couldn't protect him because I wasn't even aware that I had to protect him from this.
Yeah.
And so that's when we started saying that's our slogan. And we can't protect against what we're not aware of.
Absolutely.
So we have to let people know so that they can protect.
Yeah.
Another mom, this is I think my favorite saying, if nothing else comes out of this interview, except we've had a great time and sharing some stuff. A mom whose daughter shot herself, killed herself. And the mom said, we always tell our kids, don't. So when they do it, they're afraid to tell you because they're going to get in trouble. And I told you not to. Why'd you do that? She said, I wish I would have said, don't. But if you do, come to me.
Yeah.
We can handle it no matter what it is. And that's what Brian Montgomery said. I would have told my son, I don't care what time, day or night, I've got your back.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest message for parents, to be so open with their kids of, I am your champion. And then go in the closet and have a fit and cry and scream and punch your clothes, whatever, but come back out because they want to know that they've got a place to go. Otherwise, they're going to hide and not tell you.
Yeah. One of the things that I shared with my kids was, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what you do. We'll figure it out together. And we'll learn from it.
Yeah.
Right? We'll just learn from it. It'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. Whatever it is, it'll be fine. We'll learn from it. And
that's the perfect message. So your kids come to you.
Yeah.
They're safe.
Yeah.
And it's never too late to tell your kids
that resonated. You know what I mean? And I think it's incredibly important that parents realize that there's being the giant immovable object and being the person that says no all the time, right? But there's also the part of you where you say, okay, listen to me. If you make a mistake, it's normal. Okay.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my father told me, he said, listen, you're an aggressive kid. You're full of energy. You're going to make mistakes. Where you and I are going to get sideways is if you keep making the same mistakes and don't learn from them. That's what I shared with my kids, right?
Yeah.
There's some real wisdom there. Where, Tony Robbins likes to say that when you succeed, you tend to party.
Right.
Fail, you tend to ponder.
You'll
learn more from losing than you ever will from winning, ever. And I think it's important that kids understand that, and that parents communicate to those kids. Life is a learning experience, right? You went through it. You lost everything. You were homeless for 6 months, right? You learned from that. That won't ever happen to you again. You won't make those same mistakes again, right? But it was a learning experience. It was part of the process of life. So, and I tell the kids all the time, I'm like, look, find me the most successful person on the planet. They've made more mistakes than everybody else, and they've learned from them. Okay. It's the way it is. You're going to succeed, or you're going to learn, one of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant.
I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. You and I could probably go for 3 days straight.
I know we could.
LisaBeth, I cannot thank you enough for being here. And this has been a lot of fun. And I appreciate the fact that you have inspired the people that listen to this podcast.
Thank you. It's been I think probably the most fun I've had on a podcast. So thank you, Mike. You're a true joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called NuCalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. NuCalm.com, and the promo code is Mike15. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.